You're listening to the UnSafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
Our various sins spring from one common cause. We do what we want to do. We don't want anybody to tell us what not to do. We only are answering to the whims of our desires. So he concludes, and this is in 1982, he says, Mrs. Graham is right. What's God waiting for? Well, I'm glad he's waited to this point. More people have come to Christ. But here's something you need to remember. We are all in the middle of a very epidemic pandemic right now. The cause of this is sin.
What's the cause of all the devastation and tribulation the world will endure after the rapture? Today, Pastor Ken gives us that answer. He says the cause of all our problems is sin. It's always fatal. This curse of sin devours the earth. Sin is the result of a man following his selfish desires. When people live according to their whims and have no divine accountability, they destroy their lives and ultimately the earth. Except for those believers who leave this world during the rapture, all people will face death. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Isaiah, chapter 24, as he continues his message, The New World Order, Part 2.
I find it amazing, having been involved in criminal justice, that there are certain things that the body does involuntarily when you tell lies. They're tells, if you want to call it that. They're forensic evidence that someone is not telling you the exact truth about something. I remember we were shopping for a house when we first moved here, and one of the salesmen we talked to shot 4 of them within the first 3 minutes of deception. And I'm just going like, yeah, I think we're done talking here. I mean, it happens, but not everybody recognizes that. Well, that's what he's saying here. It shows that the work of the law is written in their hearts as their conscience bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or defend them. So how do they know that murder is wrong? Well, it's just wrong. Well, God said back in the Big Ten, thou shalt not murder. Oh, well. So here's the question. He says they've broken the everlasting covenant. What's that? What's the everlasting covenant? It's one that's hard to pinpoint, really. I mean, there are multiple eternal, everlasting covenants referenced in the Scriptures. Unfortunately, David Guzik went and found them all. I don't have to go looking for them. The covenant God made with mankind after the flood, never to judge the world again by water. There's more to it. The whole Noahic covenant in Genesis 9 is an everlasting covenant. The covenant God made with Abraham and his descendants, that they'll have the land. It's an everlasting covenant. The covenant God made with Israel and the priesthood, in other words, about the Levites, which was reconfirmed as a result of Korah and all those guys suddenly being swallowed by the earth. That's an everlasting covenant. The covenant that God made with David to bring the Messiah from his line. That's an everlasting covenant. The new covenant, which we're living under, is an everlasting covenant. Prophetically, as it says in Jeremiah, and in reality, after it was established in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 20. So, okay, we have all of these things that are everlasting covenants, but what are we talking about? Many commentators take the view that, yeah, we've got that all over the place, but this is a reference back to the Noahic covenant of Genesis chapter 9. So the question is, which covenant of that passage are we talking about? The answer is that this is the covenant that was made with the world in general, found in Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 to 17. By violating the statutes and the specific commandments, the earth has been polluted by man. The language, according to Dr. Zuck, is best interpreted against God's background, mandate to Noah. Again, one more person saying it's Noahic. Genesis 9:16 uses the phrase everlasting covenant in conjunction with God's promise to Noah. But what we see here in Isaiah is the people of earth have rebelled. We'll get to it, referenced again in Isaiah 24:16 and Isaiah 24:20. Against the mandate to multiply, to respect God's image in mankind, and by indiscriminately shedding blood, which he'll refer to in Isaiah 26:21. And then thereby polluting the land. Polluted by bloodshed. or defiled. So let's take a look at what it says in Genesis 9, 1-17. Then God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." Now that one was violated in Genesis chapter 11 by Nimrod and the boys, and that wound up in them learning how to talk one of 70 different languages. "Every living creature of the earth and every bird of the sky will be terrified of you. Everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea are under your authority." And I keep trying to convince the fish of that. Doesn't work. "You may eat anything, any moving thing that lives." I'm going to pass on bats and anyway. "As I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat with its life, that is, blood in it." Okay, so you have to drain it first. "For your lifeblood I will surely exact punishment from every living creature. I will exact punishment. From each person I will exact punishment for the life of the individual, since the man was his relative. Whoever sheds human blood, by other humans must his blood be shed. For in God's image God has made humankind. But for you, be fruitful and multiply, increase abundantly on the earth and multiply on it." God said to Noah and his sons, "Look, I now confirm my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, including the birds and domestic animals and every living creature of the earth with you, all that came out of the ark with you, every living creature of the earth, I confirm my covenant with you. Never again will all living things be wiped out by the waters of a flood. Never will a flood destroy the earth again." Notice he says nothing about fire. That'll be important. It says water, not fire. "And God said, this is the guarantee of the covenant I'm making for you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all subsequent generations. I'll place my rainbow in the cloud. It'll become a guarantee of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I'll remember my covenant with you and with all living creatures of all kinds. Never again will the waters become a flood and destroy all living things. When the rainbow's in the cloud, I'll notice it and remember the everlasting covenant," or perpetual covenant, as it says here, "between God and all living creatures of all kinds that are on the earth." So God said to Noah, "This is the guarantee of the covenant that I'm confirming between me and all living things that are on the earth." Now, we already know, I kind of referenced it, that at Babel, Yahweh judged man for violating Genesis 9:7. God said, "Go and fill the earth, be fruitful and multiply," and they all went to the plain of Shinar and said, "We're building a tower." Okay. Archaeologically, you see that they were there for about 300 years, then all of a sudden, they all split up, and everybody left. This is one of the reasons why Yahweh divided up the nations, because they violated that portion of the covenant. It was a violation of the everlasting covenant and resulted in Yahweh divorcing mankind, and he gave them over to the administration of members of the divine council. Well, that didn't work either, because they all rebelled, and we see that in Psalm 82. Those members corrupted themselves in rebellion to Yahweh, and they resulted having a change of employment for them. None of them worked for Yahweh anymore. They began demanding worship from those who they were assigned to be overwatching. And we get hints of them in the book of Daniel, where we find terms like the Prince of Greece, the Prince of Persia. Those are fallen divine beings who were originally assigned duties over them. Now, there are some who remain faithful. The prince over Israel is Michael. He's still faithful. They started demanding worship, and they started giving themselves names like Baal and Molech and Venus and Jupiter, and sometimes it's the same guy just changing his names. That's all it is, because they're liars. They all take after their leader, who was the first rebel that we saw back in Genesis chapter 3. His name was Lucifer. So the promise from Yahweh seen in Psalm 82, he's going to judge them. Those judgments that are promised in Psalm 82 are part of what Isaiah is talking about here. But there's another violation of the eternal covenant that has not happened on a worldwide basis yet. It did happen on a localized basis for the nation of Judah. In the Middle East, it appeared that the worship of Baal or the worship of Molech, here in the Americas, the worship of Quetzalcoatl, and there were other names also, involved the indiscriminate murder of children and others as sacrifices to these gods. And it continued, Quetzalcoatl continued up until Cortez, and they're still finding evidence of human sacrifice in some of the areas of the world that we're just now getting to. So it kind of went everywhere. But Here's the problem. In chapter 5, Isaiah gives an indictment to Judah. And in the indictment, he says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Baal and Molech are worshipped today, but they're called reproductive rights. It's the same God. Hasn't changed. Dwight Longenecker, who is a Catholic priest, says this: first we overlook evil, then we permit evil, then we legalize evil, then we promote evil, then we celebrate evil, then we persecute those who still call it evil. We're at that last point in our society today. That's where we are. Our culture has arrived at that location. We're ripe for judgment, but the whole world is. Because the whole world's like this is when you start talking about certain things that they like to. I find it amazing that Russia has one of the highest levels of abortion in the world, but they still have laws on the books and they are actively prosecuting anybody who comes out and says they're gay. And they're one of the few nations, besides the Islamic nations, that still does that. The whole world is ripe for judgment. That's what we're picking up on. And we already see it beginning. Chuck Colson made this comment 30 years ago. Many remember Ruth Graham's quip of a few years back that if God doesn't bring judgment on America soon, he'll have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. She did say that. To be sure, her words were tongue-in-cheek, but truth contained in sarcasm is all the more biting for the humor that masks it. Soaring divorce rates, that hasn't changed. Crime rates, hasn't changed. Actually, crime's gone down because more people are carrying weapons these days. The mounting death toll of slaughtered unborn, and that's just gotten worse, over 1 billion babies killed since 1991 worldwide. Sexual mores are so permissive as to be perverted, and they're getting worse, are the most visible manifestations of our decade. The fact is that we, as a nation, are overrun by hordes of little 10 gods all made in our own image. We're all making ourselves into our own gods. And you see that, I love it. Every time there's an election, you see all the little 10 gods show up and say, vote for me. Some of them are really trying to do something, and others are just kind of like, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, and I'm God. No, you aren't. But they'd like to make you think that they are. And how do you know a politician lies? Their lips move. Anyway, I'm done with that. Their charge is led by the crown prince of self, riding on a shining golden calf. I mean, Chuck Colson was when he repented and came to the Lord, he became pretty down to earth. Our various sins spring from one common cause. We do what we want to do. We don't want anybody to tell us what not to do. We only are answering to the whims of our desires. So he concludes, and this is in 1982, he says, Mrs. Graham is right. What's God waiting for? Well, I'm glad he's waited to this point. More people have come to Christ. But here's something that you need to remember. We are all in the middle of a very epidemic pandemic right now. The cause of this is sin. It's a worldwide epidemic, and it's 100% fatal. Every single person on the planet will die because of this sin. I mean, you can't get away from it. And everybody's trying to get away from it. They're all trying to come up with different ways to not die. But it's 100% fatal. Period. There's only one generation, and only those who believe in Jesus Christ are the ones who are going to escape that. Because Jesus will come back for his church, and we're out of here. Verse 6 of chapter 24. So because of this, because of the activities that are going on the planet, a curse devours the earth. And those who live in it, the earth dwellers, again, are held guilty. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth dwellers, are burned, and few men are left. Again, he didn't say anything about fire, okay? He did talk about flood. Dr. Spence Jones, back in 1910, said, God has pronounced a curse upon the earth on account of man's perversity, and hence the calamities which the earth is about to suffer. 4 years later, World War I started. How prophetic was that for him to say that? The curse eats at the earth, and due to it, all who live on the earth are guilty. But we see at the end of verse 6, the grace of God, just like we see in Genesis 6:8. Few men are left. That's God's grace, that men are left, people are left. Those who are faithful followers are Yahweh, still on the earth. There are some of those who are going to be left. There are going to be some tribulation saints who will still be alive at the end of the tribulation as well. And some of his people, the Jews, who will survive. The 144,000, they're all there. We know that. But the judgment will be severe. But in his grace, few men are left. And Isaiah's already hinted at that. He hinted at it in chapter 13, verse 12, where he says, I will make mortal man scarcer than pure gold, and mankind in the gold of Ophir. He's not saying I'm going to wipe them out. He says it's just going to be pretty rare to see a person. Are we ripe? Well, yeah. We're seeing more happening today than Israel experienced during the days of the judges. We're seeing anarchy. We're seeing violence. We're seeing crime. Going crazy with it. Jesus warned about these days. Well, but what was it like in the book of Judges? Judges 17:6. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Welcome to Wisconsin, Chicago, Portland. I could just keep going down the list of cities where we've been seeing this happen. We have a government, or governments, depending upon if you're looking at the state level or national level, that turns the other way and advocates evil, but says the slaughter of babies is a good thing. And as we're now learning in New York, they also wanted to get rid of all the elderly, so they sent in everybody who had COVID-19 into rest homes. By the way, euthanasia is legal in 2 nations in Europe right now, and it's being used on a regular basis, for example, in the Netherlands. Jesus called it. He really did. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. We're there. We are there. I'm waiting for the trumpet, okay? I'm waiting for come up here. It's any second. I find the phrase that Isaiah uses, though, here, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, to be very interesting and highly prophetic, especially when you go back and you take a look at what it talks about in the book of Revelation about the different seal judgments and the trumpet judgments. We do know that based on the second seal judgment, that it appears that there'll be global thermonuclear war taking place, and this is all before the midpoint of the tribulation. This is all before the beginning of the Great Tribulation. The impact of multiple warheads all at the same time could possibly strip the ozone layer off the planet, and as a result, there is no more protection from the UV light waves, which means everybody gets sunburned all the time. We also know from the 6th trumpet judgment that fire, again, figures predominantly as a judgment. By the time we get to the 4th bowl judgment, we see the statement that the sun is scorching men with fire. The atmosphere has been so stripped and so destroyed because of the catastrophic events taking place on the planet, plus man's own warfare, that there's nothing there to protect you from the rays of the sun anymore. There's no protection. It's just gone. Yeah, the inhabitants of the earth are burned. Sunburned, if you want to call it that, or it's going to be horrid. Yahweh promised to never again flood the earth with water. He didn't say anything about flame. In 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 to 7, we have to remember this. Peter tells us this. Understand this. In the last days, blatant scoffers will come. Yeah, we hear them on the radio all the time. Being propelled by their own evil urges and saying, where is his promised return? Ever since our ancestors died, all things have continued as they were from the beginning of creation. But they deliberately suppress, there's that word again, intentionally keeping the truth away. They intentionally suppress the fact that by the word of God, the heavens existed long ago and the earth was formed out of water and by means of water. Through these things, the world existed at that time, was destroyed when it was deluged with water. But by the same word, the present heavens and earth have been reserved for, here it is, fire, by being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. So what do we see happening here in Isaiah? Well, he's just referencing what's going on in the book of Revelation, which is it's going to get hot and toasty for those who are still left. at the end of the age. Now, going on, verses 7 to 13 of Isaiah 24, the new wine mourns, the vine decays, all the merry-hearted sigh. The gaiety of tambourines ceases, and the noise of revelers stops. The gaiety of the harp ceases. They do not drink wine with song. Strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The city of chaos is broken down. Every house is shut up so that none may enter. There's an outcry in the streets concerning the wine, and all joy turns to gloom. The gaiety of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city, and the gate is battered to ruins. For thus it'll be in the midst of the earth among the peoples, as the shaking of an olive tree, as the gleanings when the grape harvest is over. So he's talking about how you harvest olives or what's left when you harvest grapes. And if you've never seen, I used to watch my granddad harvest an olive tree. You literally shake it. He had a belt and a motor, and it would shake all the olives, and then you just pick them up. But there's always those at the very top you can't get. You just leave them alone. Don't worry about it. It's not worth it. So that's true. Sin has brought a curse to the earth. That's what we're talking about here. This curse is from Yahweh, and it's on all those who are earth dwellers. Again, earth dwellers are those who have no interest in being believers. They believe that what we have here on earth is it. There is no other reality. They have no escape. And starting with verse 7, we begin to see the progress of the curse. And this is in a song. So Isaiah is giving us a song, call it version 1 of it's the end of the world as we know it. The only difference is I don't feel fine at all after reading this. And we shouldn't either. Not at all. Now, verse 7, though, kicks it off, and it shows the attitude reflected early. Remember, the attitude that we saw back in Isaiah 22 was, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. That was basically what he was talking about. He was talking about the nation of Judah as they were watching all the Assyrians show up on the hills, and they're going like, well, I guess we're going to die tomorrow. Might as well eat what we got. That wasn't the right opinion. That wasn't the right thing. They should be repenting. Well, he's saying that's not even going to happen. That won't happen at this point. That's gone. We're talking about events that have taken place during the tribulation, and we're near the end of that time per Isaiah. We're near the end of the tribulation. So let's refamiliarize ourselves with what has taken place during the tribulation and the great tribulation so we can understand why it's not possible to make the pain go away through substance abuse, music, or strong drink, because that's what everybody's been turning to, and that's what they turn to today to dull the pain. They want to use substances to do it. So we'll just pick up with the fourth seal in Revelation 6. Now, seal 1, again, was false peace. Seal 2 was global war. Seal 3 is famine. And seal 4 is death. Now, with the fourth seal, we see that the authority for those to be killed is 1/4 of the population of the planet at that time. So let's back up and kind of do some estimating. As of today, the world population is 7.8 billion and growing. COVID-19 has not taken a dent into it. The death rate has actually not gone up. It's remaining constant. So let's say at the rapture, 600 million are raptured. That's a conservative number. And if you also consider all the children being raptured as well, and you say, okay, the age of accountability is 9 or 10, there's another 675 million, another 664 million there.
It's true that some of us are introverts and some of us are extroverts. But did you know Jesus designed us to function best when we're part of a community? We all have God-given gifts and abilities that, when used rightly and in conjunction with others, the effect for the kingdom of God will be profound. It will reach many who are lost and hurting. So, listeners, if you don't have a community that you belong to, won't you consider getting connected with ours? Or at least learning what we believe and why? The UnsafeBible.com has all that information, and we'd encourage you to read what's written there and then spend some time in prayer. The Unsafe Bible is a radio ministry based out of Jupiter, Florida, and we're so glad that you've paused long enough to listen to today's message from Pastor Ken. If you like what you heard today, and we've piqued your curiosity, why don't you satisfy it by checking out all the other messages we have for you? Go to the unsafebible.com and click on the Media tab. That's the direct link to our archive. We trust that what you find there will challenge and grow your faith. While you're there, be sure to check out the other ways to stay connected with what's happening here at Calvary Chapel, Martin County. Would you rather enjoy connecting through social media? You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Pick your favorite platform, or utilize all three. We trust that today's message from Isaiah spoke to your heart and challenged the parts of you that aren't looking like Jesus. Thanks for listening to the UnSafe Bible.